It was raining so hard that night the streetlights looked like trembling halos. Through the fogged windshield, the world was nothing but water and shadows. Until he saw her. A little girl, no more than 8 or 9, standing by the edge of the road, her small hands clutching a backpack twice her size. The rain poured over her hair, her dress, her shoes. Yet she didn't move. She just stood there, crying so quietly it was almost as if the storm itself was weeping with her. He slowed the car, unsure whether to stop. In the blur of headlights, she looked almost unreal, like someone the world had already given up on. Then, for a second, she lifted her face toward the light, and he saw the fear in her eyes. It wasn't just the fear of being lost. It was the fear of not being wanted anywhere. This is Stories That Heal the Heart, where we tell true feeling human stories about injustice, love, and the quiet power of forgiveness. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can rewrite a life. If you've ever been the one standing in the rain waiting for someone to stop, this story is for you. The man's hand hesitated on the steering wheel. He had places to be, people waiting for him, reasons not to get involved. But something inside him whispered, "Stop." Maybe it was the voice of the daughter he hadn't seen in years. Maybe it was the memory of the night he once cried for help and no one came. The windshield wipers beat slower, like a heart unsure of its rhythm. He turned off the engine, stepped out, and the cold hit him like truth. Water soaked his coat instantly, but it didn't matter. He walked toward her, careful not to frighten her, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes. When he spoke, his voice barely rose above the rain. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't answer. She just clutched the backpack tighter, her shoulders shaking. Lightning flashed far away, illuminating the outline of her small frame against the gray world. He noticed her shoes, muddy, torn, probably worn for too long, and then he saw something else. A little silver bracelet on her wrist, shaped like wings. A strange stillness passed between them, as if time had decided to stop the storm for a breath. The man realized he couldn't just drive away. Not this time. Not again. If stories like this remind you that goodness still exists, please like and subscribe, so these voices of hope can reach more hearts. He extended his hand through the rain. The girl looked at it for a long moment, hesitant, trembling, before her small fingers finally touched his, and for the first time that night, the thunder seemed to fade. Somewhere between fear and faith, a story began. Tonight, we remember that even in silence, love still answers. The rain had softened by the time they reached the gas station on the edge of town. He parked beneath the flickering light of a single lamppost. Water slid off the car roof like tears that refused to end. The girl sat quietly in the passenger seat, dripping and pale, her knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't said a word since she got in. Not even when he handed her a paper towel and said gently, "You can dry your hair, sweetheart." She took it with trembling fingers, but her eyes stayed on the window where the glass fogged with each breath she took. He didn't know what to ask first. Her name? Her parents? Why she was alone? Every question felt like stepping onto ice that could crack at any second. So, he said nothing. He just turned on the heater and watched the steam rise between them, two strangers wrapped in the same fragile warmth. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled by, splashing puddles that shimmered beneath the dim yellow light. The smell of gasoline mixed with rain, that metallic scent of survival. Inside the car, silence stretched, heavy but not empty. It was the kind of silence that said, "We're both broken, but we'll pretend we're fine for now." She finally spoke, a whisper barely louder than the rain. "My backpack's wet." He nodded. We can dry it inside. There's a small diner next door." Her lips moved as if she wanted to say more, but she just looked down at the silver bracelet again, rubbing it with her thumb. When they walked into the diner, the bell above the door gave a weak ring. The place was nearly empty. A middle-aged waitress wiping tables, an old man reading a newspaper, and the smell of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The waitress glanced up, her eyes flicking from the soaked girl to the man behind her. "Kitchen's closing soon," she said flatly. He nodded politely. "Just 2 hot chocolates, please, and maybe some soup if that's okay." The woman hesitated, then sighed. "Give me a minute." They sat in the corner booth. The girl hugged her backpack, staring at the cracked vinyl seat. Water dripped from her hair onto her hands, tracing small rivers that disappeared into her sleeves. He removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture startled her. She looked up for the first time, her eyes gray like the sky outside. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled softly. "You're welcome. What's your name?" "Lila." "Lila," he repeated as if tasting the sound. "Pretty name." She tilted her head. "You don't have to help me, you know." "I know," he said, "but maybe I need to." The waitress returned with 2 steaming mugs and a bowl of soup that smelled of garlic and tired kindness. Lila wrapped both hands around her cup, letting the heat soak into her fingers. For a moment, she looked like any other child on a rainy night. Then as lightning flashed through the window, her eyes flinched, and she whispered something he barely caught. He said he'd come back before it rained again. He leaned forward. "Who did?" But she didn't answer. She just pressed her lips together and stared into the chocolate as if it could keep a promise. A man in a wet jacket sat down a few tables away, his phone lighting up his tired face. He glanced at them, the man and the girl, then at the waitress, muttering something. The waitress frowned but said nothing. Judgment floated in the air like steam. A man, a child, alone at night. He felt it burn against his skin. He took a slow breath and turned toward the window. Outside, the rain drew silver lines across the glass, blurring the world beyond. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed, faint, uncertain. Lila lifted her head. "Are they looking for me?" The question broke him a little. "Maybe," he said softly. "And maybe they'll find you soon. But until then, you're safe here." Her hand trembled, spilling a drop of chocolate onto the table. Without thinking, he reached out and wiped it with a napkin. Careful, gentle, the same way he used to when his daughter was small. The memory hit him like thunder. Claire, he thought. It had been 3 years since he'd seen her, since the divorce, since the silence. She would have been about Lila's age when she started drawing angels on every page of her notebooks. He looked again at the bracelet, the tiny silver wings, and wondered if life had just sent him a reminder. The waitress brought the bill, but paused before leaving. Her voice softened. "That little girl, she reminds me of my niece. Lost her mama last year. You're doing a good thing, sir." He nodded quietly. "Just trying to help." Petala. Near the counter, the old man folded his newspaper, left a few coins on the table, and as he walked past them, he placed a small candy beside Lila's cup. He didn't say a word, just a nod. A silent blessing only the weary understand. The diner lights flickered. Outside, the storm began to fade into drizzle. For the first time that night, Lila smiled. Small, tired, but real. It was enough to make him believe the world hadn't forgotten how to be kind. When they left, she held the coat tight around her. He walked beside her toward the car, the puddles reflecting the last trembling lights of the diner. He didn't notice that. As she climbed into the seat, something slipped from her backpack, a small photograph. already soaked. It landed face down on the wet asphalt. He bent to pick it up. On the back, in a child's handwriting, was a single line, "For the man who will help me find my dad." He froze. The photograph was too blurred to see clearly, but he thought he recognized the man's silhouette. It looked hauntingly familiar. The rain started again, light but persistent, as if the sky refused to let the past rest. He slid into the driver's seat, heart pounding softly, unsure if what he felt was fear or destiny. Lila was already asleep, her small hand resting over the bracelet. The silver wings gleamed in the dim dashboard light. He stared at her, realizing he had stepped into a story he didn't yet understand. Outside, the streetlights flickered once more, and in their trembling glow, the puddles looked like mirrors, showing not just who he was, but who he might still become. The rain had thinned to a tired whisper by the time the highway gave way to neighborhood streets. Houses dozed behind curtains, porch lights making little islands of gold in the dark. He drove slowly, the heater humming, a blanket from the trunk tucked over Lila's knees. She watched the wipers sweep water into neat arcs, and for the first time since the diner, she spoke without looking away from the glass. "Do you think the rain remembers people?" she asked. He answered softly. "Sometimes. It falls on the same roofs, the same steps. It knows who waits by the window." She nodded like that was the only answer worth keeping. Her fingers traced the bracelet, silver wings, slightly tarnished, a loop that had seen too many storms. When the car paused at a red light, she lifted the backpack onto her lap and unzipped it with careful hands. A folded t-shirt, a small plastic hairbrush with several bent bristles, a sandwich wrapped in a napkin that smelled faintly of cinnamon, and a photograph in a cracked sleeve, the same one he had picked from the asphalt. She wiped it gently with the edge of the blanket and slid it back into the pocket closest to her heart. "Where did you get the bracelet?" he asked. She hesitated. The light turned green and he eased forward, letting the car float through the sleepy street. "He said it would remind me," she murmured. "Remind you of what?" "That wings are not only for leaving." Her voice carried the memorized cadence of a sentence heard many times. He did not ask who he was. Not yet. Instead, he noticed the way she kept glancing toward the rearview mirror as if the past might appear in the lane behind them, headlights bright enough to erase her. He parked beside a laundromat that glowed like a lantern on the corner. The neon open sign buzzed. Inside, rows of machines spun slow circles, a late-night rhythm for insomniacs and people with nowhere else to be. He chose the place for the reason people like him always do. It was lighted, anonymous, safe enough to think for a moment. He bought 2 sodas from the machine and a tiny box of crackers that crackled like dry leaves. They sat on the plastic chairs by the window, watching the doors of the washers thump gently against their seals. Across from them, a woman in scrubs folded small shirts into perfect squares, pressing each with the tenderness of an apology. Every few minutes she looked at her phone and smiled at something only her heart could see. Lila rubbed the sleeve of her bracelet with a corner of paper towel until the wings caught and held a little light. "If you had wings," she said, "where would you go first?" He thought of a porch light he left on every night out of habit, a ritual he could not name even to himself. He thought of a kitchen drawer with a crayon drawing of a sun wearing glasses, its rays spelled like the arms of a hug. He cleared his throat. "Home," he said. She looked as though the word had weight. "Is your home close?" "Close enough for a coat to dry," he said. "Far enough for the silence to be loud." She studied his face as if memorizing a map. "Do you have a daughter?" He almost said no, because no might have been easier. But the truth rose like a tide. He was tired of holding back. "Yes," he said. "Her name is Claire." The sound of it loosened something in the air. The woman with the scrubs glanced over as if she had felt a draft, then returned to her folding. The washers hummed, turning circles like second chances. "What happened?" Lila asked. He could have told her names and dates, the hard syllables of courts and weekends divided into halves, but those are the bones of a saint. Instead, he spoke of smaller things. The little shoes by the door that waited for feet that did not come. The paper cup of cold chocolate he kept buying at the cafe near the park where he used to meet Claire. The way a voice changes when it learns to say goodbye in a way that still sounds like hello. "I made mistakes," he said simply. "I thought work would fix what love could not. I believed I had time." Lila turned the bracelet slowly. He said that too. The sentence landed between them with the gentleness of a leaf and the gravity of a stone. He watched her blink, and a memory moved across her face like a cloud across a small sun. "What did he look like?" he asked. She shrugged. "Like someone who ran fast but came back slow." A dryer beeped and the woman in scrubs gathered the tiny shirts into a laundry basket, then paused. She walked to the vending machine, bought a small juice, and set it on the chair beside Lila without a word. Just a brief touch to the shoulder, a nod that said, "I see you." When she left, the bell on the glass door rang once, the sound brittle and kind all at once. Lila opened the juice and took a sip. "When I was little," she said, "I used to think the moon followed me home because it did not trust the dark to be polite. I wanted to tell him that." "Maybe you still can," he said. She glanced toward the photograph peeking from the pocket. Only if the rain remembers how to change its mind. He listened to the washer thump, 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 the cadence of a heart that has fallen and stands up anyway. Memories crept in, the park swing that creaked in summer, the little hand that once trusted his without counting the steps, the drawing of an angel with uneven wings taped to a refrigerator door. That drawing had a sentence printed carefully beneath it. "When you cannot find me, look for the kind man with the umbrella." He had laughed then, not understanding she was naming a future he would fail to live into. "Lila," he asked, "where were you going when I found you?" "Not far," she said, "just somewhere the rain could not hear me." A young man stepped in from the street and dumped a bag of clothes into a washer. He wore headphones, hummed off-key, pulled a crumpled store receipt from a pocket, and frowned, as if it contained a math problem he had already failed. On his way out, he dropped a quarter near Lila's shoe. She picked it up and chased him to the door to return it. He shook his head and waved it off, but then he looked down and noticed her wet sleeves and small, brave face. His smile softened, and he placed the quarter on the windowsill instead, like a coin on a wishing fountain no one had time to visit. When they left the laundromat, the night smelled of wet concrete and the aftertaste of thunderstorms. He drove a few blocks and parked by a small apartment building with brick edges and a staircase that creaked like an old song. Inside, his place was neat, the kind of neat that comes from living alone. 2 mugs in the cabinet, 2 plates stacked carefully, a single photograph on the bookshelf turned slightly toward the wall. He set a towel on the bathroom counter and showed her where the extra toothbrushes were. She moved quietly, the way children do when they are trying not to be a problem. While she showered, he placed her backpack on the kitchen table and stared at it like a letter he was afraid to open. He made grilled cheese and warm tomato soup in a small pot, the smell of it filling the apartment with a memory he had not earned in years. When she came out, her hair was damp and braided clumsily, her small shoulders narrower in the light of the kitchen. She ate slowly, as if testing whether the room would allow her to be hungry. Between spoonfuls, she glanced at the bookshelf and the photograph turned toward the wall. "Who is that?" she asked. He paused, then lifted the frame and set it upright. Claire, sitting on a park bench, chewing a straw, one sock inside out. The sunlight on her face made it look like she was learning how to be a flame. "My daughter," he said. This was the last day we spent together before everything got complicated. Lila studied the picture. She looks like she knows how to forgive. Then, almost to herself, maybe that is a kind of wings too. He swallowed and looked down at his hands. A drop of water fell from the edge of his sleeve and landed on the table with a small, exact sound. He realized the rain had come with them, clinging to the cloth, stubborn as grief. "Do you want to call anyone?" he asked. "A mom, maybe, or a neighbor. We can go to the station in the morning if you like." She shook her head quickly, panic darting behind her eyes. "Not the station," she said. "Not yet." "Okay," he said. "No station." She relaxed a little, then reached for the backpack and pulled out the photograph again. She slid it across the table. Up close, the image showed a man seen from the side, his head lowered, a hand holding a coffee cup with a faint logo of a winged horse. The edges were water-wilted, the background a blur of a street mural in a doorway. He studied the jawline, the slope of the shoulders, the way the collar sat, and something stirred, familiar as a street you have driven 1,000 times and forgotten to name. "I keep it because of the door," she said. "The door?" She pointed to the far edge of the photo. There, nearly lost to the warp of the paper, was a number painted above the frame. Not a complete address, just a fragment of digits the rain had tried to erase. "When I was smaller," she said, "he would draw little doors on my notebook. He said, 'One day, when you need me, you will know which door is mine.' I thought it was a game. But then he stopped coming as much, and the doors in my drawing started to look like windows that forgot how to open." He leaned closer. The number, barely legible, pulled at his memory like a loose thread. Beside it, a sticker on the glass reflected a partial word, Arden. His mind sorted possibilities, garden, warden, Arden. A strip mall cafe on the east side had a sign that read, "Arden and Sons Tailoring," in faded paint above a shuttered window. Next door, a thrift store with a bell that barked instead of rang. And across from them, a garage with a mural of a horse with wings. He had driven past it countless times. He could almost hear the rattle of its aluminum door. "Lila," he said carefully, "did he ever take you to a place with a horse painted on the wall?" Her eyes lifted, and for a moment the room seemed to step closer to the truth. She nodded slowly. "We counted the feathers. He said there were as many as second chances." A softness ran through him like warmth through cold hands. The image breathed. The address fragment became a street. The door became a door again. He wanted to promise instant answers, but promises made at night often break in morning light. So he chose gentler words, the kind that make space for breath. "We can try to find that place tomorrow," he said. "No police if you do not want them yet. Just two people and a street that remembers a mural." She held the bracelet, wings catching the kitchen light. He used to say rain means the sky is practicing how to forgive. "What do you think it means?" he asked. "That sometimes people get wet together, and it feels less cold." He set a folded blanket on the couch and a pillow that still smelled faintly of laundry soap. She lay down, tucking the photograph beneath her cheek the way other children tuck toys. The apartment settled into its night sounds, pipes clicking, a neighbor's television murmuring through a wall like the afterthought of a party no one wanted to attend. He turned off the lamp. Moonlight seeped through the blinds, carving thin ladders on the floor. He stood at the window for a long time, hands on the sill, watching the rain gather again as if the clouds had changed their mind. Across the street, a porch light burned steady outside a second-floor apartment. A woman stepped out, set a bowl on the mat, and went back in. A stray cat approached like a memory finally trusting the hand that feeds it. Petala, quiet kindness, continuing on another stage. Proof that not all good needs an audience. He thought of the laundromat coin on the windowsill, of the diner candy, of the juice left by a stranger. Small acts that tilt the world by degrees. He thought of Claire's angel drawings and the sentence that once made him laugh. Look for the kind man with the umbrella. He had no umbrella tonight, only a wet coat, and the sense that perhaps kindness is not a prop, but a decision. Sleep pulled at him, slow and heavy, but before he turned away from the window, a movement on the sidewalk below drew his eye. A figure paused beneath the street lamp, hands in pockets, studying the building as if counting floors. The face stayed in shadow, the posture familiar in a way he could not place, a posture born of people who have practiced leaving. After a moment, the figure moved on, swallowed by the rain. He almost woke Lila, but he let the night keep its secrets. He lay down on the floor beside the couch instead, close enough to hear her breathing even out. In the quiet, the apartment's clock ticked, gentle, insistent, a metronome for choices postponed too long. When the storm swelled again near dawn, Lila stirred and whispered without opening her eyes. He said he would come back before it rained again. The clock answered with another small tick. He closed his eyes and made a vow that did not sound like a trumpet, only like a father learning a prayer. Before breakfast, he wrote a list on the back of an old envelope, places with murals, doors with numbers that start like the one in the photograph, cafes that serve coffee in cups with winged horses. He placed the paper beneath the photograph and noticed something he had missed the night before. A faint crease on the image, not from folding, but from being pressed against another object. He turned the photo over. In the corner under the child's handwriting, a smudge of ink shaped like half a fingerprint curved toward the edge. He pressed his own thumb beside it without touching, matching the arc from a respectful distance. It aligned too easily, and he understood the dizzying truth of cities, that everyone's fingerprints are cousins if you trace the lines far enough. He brewed coffee while the rain softened into a hush that sounded almost like applause. Lila sat up, hair untamed, the bracelet bright against her wrist. She slid into the chair, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Silence, for once, did not feel empty. It felt like two people standing in front of a locked door with the right key somewhere near. "What if we do not find him?" she asked. "Then we find what kindness looks like when it does not get what it wants," he said, "and we let that be enough to walk another street." She breathed out, a small, steadying sound. "Okay." He took the photo, the list, the bracelet's gleam in his periphery, and folded his heart around a map made of memory and rain. When they stepped into the hallway, the air smelled of bread from a downstairs oven and the chemical clean of morning. He locked the door, slipped the keys into his pocket, and paused. On the doormat lay a flyer for a neighborhood fair from months ago. The ink faded. A sketch of a carousel horse in the corner with wings drawn by a bored volunteer. He tucked it into his jacket without thinking. Sometimes the world leaves breadcrumbs without realizing it is being kind. On the walk to the car, Lila skipped one puddle and then another, each leap small but undeniable. He felt the urge to reach for her hand, then waited until she reached first. When her fingers slid into his, the rain made a softer sound. They sat in the car, doors clicking, seat belts crossing chests like quiet vows. He turned the key. The engine answered with a low, faithful hum. He set the photograph on the dashboard. The partial number facing up, the winged cup turned toward the road and pulled into the lane that led toward the part of town where murals teach brick walls how to dream. Behind them, the apartment window held the ghost of their shapes for a second longer, then let go. Ahead, the street opened like a sentence that had been waiting for years to find its verb. The wipers moved. The rain listened. And the day, not yet decided, made room for the fragile courage of two people who believed doors could still be found. The morning unrolled in shades of gray and silver, the kind of light that makes puddles look like mirrors and people like memories walking through them. The man, his name was Daniel, though Lila didn't know it yet, drove slowly through the waking city. The rain had softened into drizzle, smearing the edges of everything. Shop signs, faces behind windows, hope itself. They passed small stores still shuttered, their metal doors marked with graffiti and rain streaks. A man swept the sidewalk outside a bakery, the smell of bread curling through the damp air like forgiveness. Lila watched him as if memorizing the smell, then whispered, "He used to buy me bread when it rained, the kind with sugar on top." Daniel smiled faintly. "My daughter liked that kind too. She said it tasted like Sunday mornings." Lila nodded. He said Sundays are just Saturdays that believe in miracles. Her words caught him off guard, as if someone had reached inside his chest and turned a lock that hadn't moved in years. He drove another block in silence before spotting it. The mural. A white horse, with blue wings stretched across a wall stained by time and water. Below it, a row of shops, a tailor's with a cracked sign, a shuttered laundromat, and beside it, a door with the number half erased by years of rain. Lila pressed her hand against the window. "That's it." Daniel parked and turned off the engine. They stepped into the light drizzle, which felt gentler now, like the sky whispering it was tired too. The door's paint had peeled into curls and a single sticker clung to the frame, a winged horse, the same from the cup in the photograph. He knocked. Once, twice, no answer. Then through the frosted glass, a faint silhouette moved. The door opened just enough to reveal a woman in her 40s, wearing a gray sweater and a cautious look. "Can I help you?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "We're looking for someone. A man who might have worked here or lived upstairs." The woman's eyes drifted to Lila. "Upstairs?" she said softly. "You mean Tom?" Lila's fingers tightened around Daniel's hand. "That's him," she whispered. The woman sighed. "He doesn't live here anymore. He left months ago. Left a note, actually." She turned and disappeared for a moment, then returned with a small envelope, edges curled, name written in blue pen, for Lila. The girl's lips parted, a soundless breath escaping. She took the envelope as if afraid it might dissolve. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. The woman nodded. He was kind, always paid late, but always paid. She hesitated, then added, he used to stand under that mural every night, said it reminded him of promises he hadn't kept. They walked back to the car, the rain whispering its approval. Inside, Lila stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled. "Do you want me to?" Daniel began. She shook her head. "I want to read it by myself, but can I stay here?" He nodded. She turned toward the window, the envelope trembling in her lap. The rain slowed, each drop deliberate. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, creased from too many foldings. Her eyes moved silently across the words. A tear fell, darkening the ink. "He said he tried to come back," she whispered. But he got sick. He said, if I found this, it meant I was brave enough to find him in another way. Daniel felt something break quietly inside him. She held out the paper. He wrote that he met someone who reminded him of me, said that person would bring me home. The words blurred in Daniel's vision. Maybe he meant someone kind. She nodded. Or someone who remembers how to listen. They sat there, listening to the rain tap against the roof like fingertips on glass. Can we go see where he is now? She asked. Daniel swallowed. If you know, yes. She pointed to the bottom of the note. There was an address just a few blocks away, a hospice. He started the engine again, and they drove in silence, the wipers marking time. The city passed like a slow film, faces, lights, doorways, all witnesses to something sacred unfolding quietly among them. At the hospice, a volunteer greeted them. The building smelled of antiseptic and lilies. Daniel explained briefly, showing the note. The volunteer's expression softened. Tom? She said. Yes. He was here. Her voice gentled. He passed a week ago. Lila's breath hitched. The woman continued, but he left something for a girl named Lila. Wait here. Minutes later, she returned with a small box wrapped in faded paper. Inside lay a cup, white, chipped, painted with the same winged horse. And beneath it, a photograph of a man smiling faintly, holding a newborn wrapped in a yellow blanket. Lila touched the cup as though it were holy. He said, the volunteer added, that if a man ever came here with kind eyes, the girl should trust him. Daniel's hands trembled. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Outside, the rain began again, softer now, more like memory than weather. They walked to a small garden behind the hospice where roses drooped under the drizzle. Lila set the cup on the stone bench, the wings catching a last glimmer of light before the clouds swallowed the sun. He wanted to fly, she said. But maybe flying just means not being afraid to love again. Daniel looked at her, the soaked hair, the fragile strength, and felt the quiet return of something he thought he had lost the night he last saw his daughter: faith in small redemptions. He reached into his pocket and took out the laundromat coin. Here, he said, placing it beside the cup. For another wish? She smiled, eyes full of rain light. Do you think the rain will remember this too? Yes, he said, because now it falls for two people who finally stopped running. They stood there until the drizzle thinned into mist, the world wrapped in soft gray forgiveness. A woman passed with an umbrella, paused, and without a word, left it leaning beside them before walking away. Another quiet petal in the chain of unseen kindness. That night back at the apartment, Lila sat at the kitchen table writing in a small notebook. Daniel cooked soup again, the same as before. The smell filled the room like an old friend returning. When she finished, she tore a page and handed it to him. For you, she said. On it, in a child's hand, were 4 words, you found me home. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his wallet behind a picture of Claire. The rain had stopped. The air outside shimmered with the scent of wet earth and bread from the downstairs bakery. He opened the window, and the breeze touched his face, like a hand that forgives. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. And somewhere, beyond the clouds, a man who once stood beneath a mural of wings might have smiled too. Because in a world that keeps forgetting kindness, 2 people had remembered it together. The street lamp outside flickered, then steadied, light, finding its courage again. The afternoon held the city in a quiet pause, the kind of hush that follows rain when every surface still remembers being touched. Daniel and Lila walked back from the hospice with the winged cup wrapped in a dish towel. The small box pressed to Lila's chest as if the weight kept her from floating away. The sidewalk glistened. Leaves clung to the curb. A delivery truck idled near the corner store. Somewhere a bell chimed from a church that did not appear on any of his usual routes, the sound worn smooth by years of ringing for strangers. They stopped at a crosswalk where the stripes were faded to ghosts. Lila tilted the box and listened to the soft clack of the cup inside, a heartbeat in porcelain. "He used to tap the rim when he laughed," she said, "and tap the towel once, a tiny sound that might have been a knock on a door." She looked up. "Do you think he knew I would find him here?" Daniel thought of the note, the address pinned in careful letters, the way a man tries to leave a map for a child when he cannot promise his footsteps. "He left you a line to follow," he said, "and you followed it." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded, as if granting the world permission to keep moving. At the apartment, he rinsed the cup and set it on a towel beside the sink. The wings, chipped and faded, caught a band of late light sneaking in past the blinds. Lila watched the water run over the rim, a small current passing the lip as if the cup were learning how to be a river. "Maybe it was always meant for two," she murmured. He opened the window a little. The street smelled of yeast and rain, and the sound of the downstairs bakery rose like forgiveness warming in an oven. He made tea and cut slices from a loaf the baker had given him that morning with a wink, and the soft sentence, "for the girl who looked like drizzle and sunlight at once." The bread steam curled around them, finding old rooms inside the lungs that still remembered kindness. He wanted to call Claire. The impulse felt like a bird gathering at the edge of a windowsill, legs tense, ready to try air again. He pictured scrolling to her name and stopping in that bright, brutal space where a father's thumb hovers because one syllable can turn a day. The phone lay face down on the counter like a sleeping witness. He did not pick it up, not yet. The day had taught him the discipline of gentler clocks. Lila ate her bread in patient bites, as though hunger were something to be trusted only slowly. After a while, she placed the bracelet on the table and turned it in circles with a forefinger. "He always said the wings mean staying too," she said. "Not only leaving." She paused. "Today I think I know what he meant." She asked for paper. He fetched a small pad from a drawer, the one he used for grocery lists and apologies he never mailed. She drew an open door with 3 steps and a porch light. Above it, she wrote in her careful, rounded hand, "When you cannot find me, wait by the door someone left on for you." When she finished, she glanced at the winged cup and added a little horse in the corner, its blue smudged by a fingertip that had not dried. He watched, not as a judge of drawings, but as a man who had been gifted a mirror made of crayons. Each line was a revelation he had not earned, an invitation to be brave without speeches. The quiet hummed. The apartment clock ticked in even breaths, and somewhere in the hall a door closed with the soft punctuation of neighbors who know how to be gentle with each other. Later, when the light slid toward evening, Daniel did something he had not done in a long time. He took his spare jacket from the hook by the door and shook out the rain that had dried into a salt of memory. He folded it and placed it beside Lila's backpack. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Back to the mural," he said. "There's a tailor next door. If Tom kept a tab, someone might remember him. And maybe—" He didn't finish. Some hopes work better as an ellipsis. They walked in that hour when shopkeepers turn signs and mothers call from windows and bus drivers wave at the same crossing guard without needing a word. Pigeons strutted with the ceremony of small kings. A boy dribbled a ball that sounded like a hollow drum counting footsteps. At the corner, a florist dragged buckets to the curb, and a single carnation toppled from the rim, catching on a crack like a flag refusing to fall. Lila bent, righted it, and tucked the stem back among the others. Petal, small, unseen goodness continuing its quiet arithmetic. At the tailor's, a bell chirped with an embarrassed squeak. The shop smelled of cotton and chalk, iron, and the sweet singe of steam. The tailor himself, a stooped man with white hair like a halo undone by weather, looked up from a suit jacket pinned at the shoulder. "Evening," he said. And his eyes found the winged bracelet and then Daniel's damp coat, and he made a tiny triangle of context with his gaze. People who take measurements for a living read stories and hymns. "We're looking for someone who used to stand outside," Daniel said. "Name was Tom." The old man pressed a finger to his lower lip, thinking. "Tom," he repeated, and nodded. He brought shirts once, poorly stitched by a friend. Always paid late, always said he was trying to do better. He stepped into the back and returned with a brown envelope. "He asked me to hold this for the day it rains the right way, whatever that means." The old man's smile was a small shrug. Rain has many grammars. The envelope had Lila's name. Inside was a photograph of the mural taken from farther back, the horse's wings arching wide, and in the corner a man and a little girl laughing with their backs half turned toward the camera. On the reverse, a message. "If you stand where we stood and close your eyes, you will hear the sound of wings again. When you do, follow it to the place with the bell that barks." Lila's face lit with the fierce, contained joy of children who receive a clue, not a conclusion. "The thrift store," she whispered. "The bell." They crossed to the next door, where the bell indeed barked. A comic, scolded sound. Inside, bodies of old sweaters waited for new shoulders. Stacks of plates dreamed of future cakes. And a row of frames without photographs offered borders to moments not yet captured. The woman at the counter wore a scarf printed with tiny moons and said, "Hello," like a lullaby. Daniel explained, holding up the photograph. The woman recognized the man in the background, the slim jaw and used jacket. "Yes," she said softly. "He fixed our back step once without asking. Said a good door should not make people hesitate." Lila smiled. The woman reached under the counter and produced a small tin shaped like a star. "He left this with the note that a star should go to a girl who looks for doors." Inside were 10 paper slips folded into small squares. Each held a sentence, handwritten by Tom. "Love is the courage to stay after you learn why someone left. A porch light is a kind of prayer. A cup is just a hand that learned how to hold. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without holding your breath. When it rains, stand under the first roof and then make another with your body." Lila read them all, one by one, as if tasting each word to see which belonged to today. When she reached the last, "If you find a man with kind eyes, trust him until he proves you wrong." She looked up at Daniel and, without the grand announcement that adults favor, slipped her hand into his. The gesture was so small it might have been missed by anyone not in the business of being found, but Daniel felt the temperature of the afternoon change. They stepped back onto the sidewalk with the star tin. The envelope and the photograph returned to the box with the cup. The mural's blue wings beat across the wall with the patience of paint. The air thinned as evening sidled in and streetlights warmed like thoughts turning tender. On the way home, a sudden shower surprised the block, a quick silver veil that made the world smile in spite of itself. People ducked under awnings. A teenager lifted his jacket over a friend's hair. A woman laughed, a clear bell sound that erased the tired line between work and the possibility of singing. Daniel paused and did what he had not planned to do. He shrugged out of his coat and held it above Lila like a clumsy, earnest roof. He expected her to hurry, to hide beneath the scrap of dry, but she did something else. She stepped half outside the coat and raised her face to the rain. She closed her eyes, and there, in the thin shower, she whispered, "Okay, I'm not afraid." He lowered the coat and let the rain find them both. It was not a heroic soaking, only a quiet agreement with weather. The city blurred and sharpened by turns as if someone were adjusting the focus on a memory. When the brief burst ended, he felt lighter, as though he had finally allowed the sky to wash a word he had mispronounced for years. That night, the apartment gathered them like a patient friend. Daniel cooked a simple dinner: rice, eggs, a handful of scallions he chopped without looking, muscle memory from a time when cooking had been his way of apologizing for being late. Lila set the 2 plates on the table, then hesitated. She fetched a third, placed it carefully, and laid the winged cup before it. Not for a ghost, not for a ritual crowded with superstition, only for the quiet acknowledgement that love takes up space when it is invited to sit. They ate. The clock counted. The world outside softened to the soft clack of someone ascending stairs and the hush of a baby at the end of a hallway remembering how to be soothed. After dishes, Lila found a box of old crayons Daniel had kept without knowing why. She drew the mural again, this time with an open door beneath the horse, and in the doorway a small silhouette that looked suspiciously like a child who had decided to be brave. Daniel drew beside her for the first time in years, a clumsy porch light that leaned but did not fall. Their drawings met in the middle, like neighbors shaking hands over a fence only they could see. Sleep hovered near but did not insist. Daniel stood by the window with his phone in his hand and the winged cup on the sill. The moon pressed its thumbprint against the glass. He dialed a number he had not dialed since a winter when he had let happiness snow without stepping outside. The ringtone filled the room like a hallway that knew his footsteps. A voice answered, small, familiar. "Hello?" He swallowed. "Claire." The name found air gently. There was a pause in which a life could turn around. "Dad?" "I didn't expect you to pick up," he said. I wanted to hear your voice." He looked at Lila, asleep on the couch, one hand on the star tin, the other curled near her cheek. "I met someone today," he added. "A girl who reminded me that umbrellas are good, but sometimes standing in the rain is the only way to tell the sky you're not running anymore." Another pause, shorter this time. "I remember your old umbrella," she said with the softness of a memory that has shed its teeth. "It leaked at the seams." "I've been patching," he said. "Inside, I mean." She breathed out a sound like a smile. "Mom's okay," she said. "I'm okay. We're around." The pause shifted. "I have a soccer thing on Saturday morning. You could come if you want. No pressure." All the moments Daniel had hoped for arrived not like trumpets, but like warm laundry pulled from a dryer and handed to cold hands. "I would like that," he said. "I would like that very much." After he hung up, he didn't collapse into the opera of relief. He simply stood very still, like a man learning the posture of not missing the next step. He wrote the time on the back of one of Tom's sentences so he would not forget. Not because memory is weak, but because gratitude deserves handwriting. He returned the phone to the counter and found Lila awake, watching him with a curiosity that did not demand a report. "Was that your daughter?" she asked. "Yes," Is she nice? Yes, he said, and then, without ceremony, she used to draw angels with uneven wings. I thought it was a mistake. Now I think maybe she knew something about balance. Lila nodded as if pleased that the math of hearts could be solved without numbers. Do you think she would like me? I think she knows how to make room. Lila turned on her side and tucked the star tin beneath her palm. Sometimes home is just the place where your hand fits. He sat on the floor beside the couch, close enough to hear her breaths fall into a rhythm that taught the apartment how to be a lullaby. He placed the winged cup on the coffee table, just close enough to catch the low light. It stood there, not as a shrine to absence, but as an instrument of presence, a small vessel that knew how to hold more than liquid, memory, permission, the permission to be new. In the middle of the night, the storm returned without the thunder. A soft rehearsal of all the rains that might still come and find a welcome. Daniel rose, pulled the blanket higher over Lila's shoulder, and opened the window enough to let in a narrow strand of sound. In the alley, a stray dog shook itself and settled beneath an awning. Across the street, a nurse in pale scrubs sat on the stoop with a sandwich, chewing slowly, eyes closed, a rest stitched into the fabric of duty. Pedal, again, the city performing its quiet acts of not giving up. Toward dawn, he dreamed he was holding a cup that hummed like a seashell, and inside the hum were footsteps, and inside the footsteps, the simple sentence children speak when they have learned the difference between leaving and returning. I am here. He woke with the taste of that sentence in his chest. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bread. He brewed 2 cups and poured warm milk into one the way he remembered doing for Claire when she believed foam was a kind of cloud you could keep. Lila walked to the window and watched a row of sparrows bicker at the edge of a puddle. They are sharing and not sharing at the same time, she announced. Like people. He laughed quietly. That sounds right. They planned the day without writing it down. First, they would return to the hospice garden and leave a small bouquet by the bench where the cup had shone. Lila wanted daisies. Daniel knew a stall near the subway that sold them by the handful and sometimes threw in a ribbon just because the seller preferred color in the world. Then they would stop by the thrift store to thank the woman with the moon scarf. After that, he would take Lila to a cafe where the barista drew hearts on the foam when she thought no one was watching. Last, in the late afternoon, they would walk to the park where a field waited for cleats and shouting, and where, if permission allowed, a certain girl could wave and a certain man could practice the act of staying within the same frame as the day. Before they left, Lila placed the winged bracelet on Daniel's wrist. It was too small. It perched there like a bird who trusted a branch by mistake and decided to stay anyway. It's a loan, she said. You have to give it back when you're ready. Ready for what? To know that wings also mean staying. He nodded. He did not correct the grammar. Her sentence understood a kind of truth dictionaries have not yet earned. They carried the cup carefully, wrapped again, and the star tin inside the box's hollow. The corridor's stale bulb hummed. The elevator door opened with the grace of old bones. On the ground floor, the baker handed Lila a paper bag with a smile and one conspiratorial word, free. She peered inside and found 2 sugared rolls and a small slip of paper stamped with a winged horse. For luck, he said. Pedal, kindness, redundant and necessary. On the sidewalk, the day had learned its colors. Cars passed with the patience of citizens who know mornings are half forgiveness, half beginning. At the crosswalk, a woman in a red coat reached for her child's hand and gave Daniel a nod that carried no suspicion, only recognition. The way people sometimes wave to each other on the day they have both decided to be gentle. In the hospice garden, Lila set the daisies in a cup they borrowed from the nurse's station. They did not speak. The bench remembered them without asking questions. When they turned to go, an older man in a hat stood at the path's bend. He had the posture of someone who has learned to carry a name that keeps echoing from rooms no one occupies anymore. "Excuse me," he said to Lila. "You left this yesterday." He held out a small square, one of Tom's sentences on the folded slip. "A porch light is a kind of prayer." Lila smiled and pressed it to her chest. The man tipped his hat, and for a second Daniel thought he saw the outline of Tom in the gesture. Not the face, not the body, just the grammar of someone trying to keep light lit for a child. Then the man turned away and the world returned to its ordinary miracle. On the way back, they stopped at a street vendor selling small silver charms on a velvet board. Lila pointed to a pair of wings and then to a tiny key. "May I trade?" she asked, placing the laundromat coin on the man's hand. He studied the quarter and the girl and nodded like a king granting a petition purely because he liked the sound. He hooked the key beside the wings on the bracelet and tightened the clasp. Two symbols, newly married by the logic of a child who knows doors are also skies. Near noon, Daniel found himself in front of a schoolyard he had not visited since a day when he had pretended to be busy in order to hide how much a father can want to be let back in. A whistle blew. A coach gestured. On the bleachers, parents scattered their bags and hopes with careless symmetry. Daniel stood not on the sidelines but not far either. He did not raise a hand or make a promise. He simply watched as a girl, taller than the last time, quicker, hair pulled into a ponytail that swung like punctuation, chased a ball and laughed when she missed and laughed again when she did not. He felt Lila lean against his side and sensed they had both learned something about spectatorship. Sometimes love is cheering. Sometimes love is simply refusing to leave. Claire saw him. Of course she did. Children know the geometry of faces they have had to subtract. She waved, small at first, then larger, and when he waved back, the air did not crack with hystery. It warmed. After the scrimmage, she walked over, wiped grass from her knees, and looked at Lila with a curiosity that did not sting. "Hi," she said. Lila held up the star tin in greeting, and then tucked it back against her ribs as if hearts need a home during introductions. "Do you want to get ice cream?" Claire asked. It was such an ordinary question that Daniel almost stepped back from the holiness of it. They said yes. The three of them walked to a cart where a teenage boy with a bored expression offered flavors like choices between good days. They sat on a low wall and ate slowly. And when a drop of melted sweetness slid down Lila's wrist, Claire handed her a napkin without comment. The gesture nestled in Daniel's chest like a bird finding an old nest improved by time. They parted with the promise of another Saturday that could hold the weight of 3 people without cracking. Daniel did not overreach. He did not fill the space with sentences that proved he had been practicing apologies. He simply said, "Thank you." And Claire nodded with an ease that might one day graduate into a hug without ceremony. Evening found them back at the apartment where the light made the winged cup glow like a small moon. Daniel wrote a note and taped it inside the cabinet where he kept flour and sugar. "If you are here, make tea. Leave a cup for someone who cannot come. Love is a practice." He did not write his name. There are places in a home where names are already understood. Lila sorted Tom's sentences and chose one to keep on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without holding your breath. She read it aloud once and then again more quietly, and when she reached the last word, she exhaled with a care that felt like opening a long-locked window. Night settled. Rain did not come. Sometimes mercy is the sky deciding it has said enough for one day. Daniel washed the winged cup and dried it with the old dish towel, then set it in the center of the table with the star tin beside it. He turned off every light except the small lamp near the couch. Lila curled beneath a blanket that now smelled faintly of daisies. He sat on the floor back against the cabinet and let the quiet grow tall around them. The gesture that changed everything had not been grand. It was a door opened and kept open. It was a coat held above a girl for a minute and then lowered so the rain could tell the truth. It was a phone call that did not demand. It was a bracelet loaned with a key newly added. The change itself did not fire a flare. It moved through the room like a new grammar, a way to use the word we without breaking it. Past midnight, Daniel woke to a soft sound, a clink, as if porcelain had interrupted a dream. He sat up. The winged cup had shifted a half-inch on the table, the towel beneath it settling from the cool night air. He almost laughed at his own imagination, then chose not to bully the moment with logic. He accepted the small omen. Even cups move when homes remember how to breathe. In the quiet that followed, a sentence formed not in his throat, but in his chest, a vow in the simplest conjugation. He did not repeat it aloud, because some promises live longer when they do not hear themselves. He stood, adjusted the blanket over the sleeping girl, and returned to the window, where the city blinked and accepted the long work of continuing to exist. Somewhere 2 floors up, a neighbor lit a candle and set it on the sill. The flame reflected in the winged cup a second later, a borrowing of light so small and so exact that Daniel felt the room's temperature tilt again toward the better side of human. He left the window open a crack and lay down, the floor not cold anymore, the night not so large. When morning would come, they would return a library book that was due from a life ago, buy groceries with a list that included words like oranges and together, and maybe, if courage allowed, walk to a porch whose light stayed on even under sun. But now, as the apartment rested, an invisible mountain had already shifted its weight. What had been heavy felt willing to be carried by 2. The gesture had done its work. The change was alive, unannounced, and waiting for the perfect, ordinary day to show itself in full. Outside, a single car passed and a puddle shivered into rings. Inside, the winged cup held nothing but the echo of tea and, somehow, the weight of 2 hands learning how to hold without fear of being dropped. The air smelled faintly of bread and rain. The clock ticked with the patience of a heart that understands there are speeds other than running. And somewhere very near, kindness turned another corner on its slow, faithful route. Evening took the city back into its arms, street by street, the way a parent learns to gather what the day has scattered. The sidewalks cooled, shop windows softened into mirrors. Somewhere a radio played a song that remembered last summer better than anyone else. Daniel and Lila walked slowly, carrying nothing more visible than the gentleness of people who had run out of reasons to hurry. The winged cup stayed on the kitchen table at home, haloed by the lamplight they had left on like a small, faithful sun. The bakery smell still threaded the stairwell when they reached the door again. On the mat lay a thin envelope, edges damp from leftover mist, his name written in a rounded hand that had learned to keep steady under fluorescent bulbs. For the man with the umbrella that isn't an umbrella. He knew that handwriting already. He had seen it on the hospice form, neat and uncomplaining. Inside, a business card for the hospice, a date scribbled beneath it, and 3 words, "One more thing." He looked at Lila and smiled with the kind of warmth that does not promise outcomes, only company. "Do you still have room for another walk?" he asked. She nodded, braid frayed at the end like a sentence that wanted to keep going. They went back out into the long, blue hour. The city was quieter now, as if it had decided to speak in commas instead of exclamation marks. The hospice garden lamps hummed gently. The volunteer with kind eyes and tired shoulders met them at the front desk and lifted a small, rectangular device from under a stack of pamphlets. "He left a recording," she said. "We only found it today when we cleaned the drawer. He said it was for the girl who follows rain and for the man who teaches coats how to be roofs." She shrugged, smiling at the odd mercy of how people phrase hope when they have learned the price of precision. They were led to a quiet room with 2 chairs and a window that held the last light like a promise waiting for breath. The device clicked, a soft buzz. Then a voice entered the room. Tom's voice was gentler than Daniel had imagined, the kind of gentleness that comes from losing things without bitterness. He spoke as if telling a bedtime story to a world that had been scolded for crying. "Lila," the voice said, "if you are hearing this, you found doors I forgot to lock. I am sorry for the rooms I did not know how to build. I wanted wings for you. I forgot that wings also mean staying. If there is a man beside you, I want to tell him something I never said to anyone, not even to the nurse who learned my coughs. I saw you once, sir. Not here. Not now. Long before this voice learned to be careful." Daniel's breath caught without asking permission. Tom continued, the timbre of his words carrying a light ache that felt like truth instead of drama. "You were standing in the rain without an umbrella outside a park fence. You had a brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches, and you were pretending that not going in was a kind of patience. A little girl sat on a bench with a woman who held all the shields. The girl looked at the fence and then at the sky, and I watched your face become a map of what you wanted to give and what you believed you were allowed to give. I was the man at the food truck that day. I wanted to say, 'Go in anyway.' I did not. I am saying it now." The room pressed closer. The volunteer looked down at her hands as if giving grief a little privacy. Tom's voice softened further, a tide going out without complaint. "If Lila is with you, you are already the man I hoped you were. Do not try to be her replacement roof. Teach her how to build a porch light. They last longer. To you, little one, your bracelet was from a thrift store bin I pretended was a treasure chest. The wings are cheap. Your courage is not. Keep the cup. It reminded me to hold things without dropping them when my hands shook. If my voice is the last thing I can leave you, let it be this. Forgiveness is not a gate at the end of a road. It is the road that teaches your feet where to go." The recording clicked off. In the second that followed, the room did not rush to fill the silence with explanations. It let the silence do the sacred math. Lila's eyes glistened, not with the panic of earlier rains, but with the clarity of someone who has recognized that love can travel farther than a body. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his wrist and stared at the window until he could name 1 star. The volunteer cleared her throat softly. "He left a folder too," she said. "No legal papers. Just things that want to be kept by someone who will not sell them for more than they're worth." She handed over a thin file, a drawing of a winged horse done in a shaky hand, a folded thrift store receipt with the words "For the girl with doors" penciled on the back, and a list of names, first names only, with small notes. Baker, free bread when it rains. Taylor, keeps secrets like coats. Moonscarf, remembers faces. Nurse on the step, so sits with the lonely 15 minutes past her break. It read like a map of kindness, disguised as errands. They left with the device in the folder and the feeling of having been included in the last paragraph of a letter intended for the future. Outside, the garden had learned how to be night properly. Leaves were darker, petals closed like hands at rest. A single moth beat against the lamplight and then thought better of it. Lila sat on the bench and placed the star tin beside her knee. She whispered something Daniel did not catch, and a moment later he understood that not catching it was the point. Some prayers do not require witnesses, only weather. "We should go see the baker," she said at last, the decision simple as breathing. They did. The bell over the bakery door chimed with gratitude instead of commerce. The baker slid a small bag across the counter before they could ask. 2 sugared rolls blooming like moons under a paper sky. "From a friend," he said. On the bag, in pencil, he had drawn a tiny cup with wings. Petal upon petal, the day kept proving that heaven is just another word for the way good hands form a circle when no one is taking attendance. On the walk back, Daniel's phone vibrated. A message blinked onto the screen. "Saturday. Field 3. 10 o'clock. I told Coach maybe you'd be there." He stared at it until the night rearranged itself around the sentence. He typed "I will" and erased it. He typed "I'll be on time" and erased that too because it sounded like a costume. He typed "Thank you for asking me" and kept it. When he put the phone away, he felt lighter in the way people feel lighter when they set down guilt and pick up gratitude. At home, the winged cup welcomed them back with the kind of patience reserved for teapots and old friends. He warmed milk and poured it into the cup, a small offering to the air. They sat at the table and sorted Tom's slips again. Lila took the one about porch lights and tapped it twice with a forefinger like a priest of small sacraments. "If we leave the lamp on, someone might know where to knock," she said. "Maybe someone already does," he answered, and thought of a girl with a jersey number and a laugh that sounded like a second chance. He thought of a balcony across the street where a neighbor put out a bowl for a cat who had learned to accept a name. He thought of the tailor's envelope and the woman with the moon scarf and the nurse on the steps. The city, for all its noise, had been humming the same tune all day long. They slept early enough to meet the next morning with younger eyes. He woke before the alarm and, for a second, did not remember how loneliness had once rehearsed in this room every night. The floorboards sighed. The light at the window arrived carefully, a hand on a doorknob that did not want to startle. He brewed coffee. Lila wandered in, hair more cloud than braid, stretching like a person who trusts roofs. "We could make a list," she said, climbing onto the chair with knees tucked, "of all the people who keep doors." So they did. Baker, tailor, moon scarf, nurse, man who fixed the step is gone, but his hammer sound remains. Lila added you without asking permission, and then, she more softly, her, circled in the pronoun, and Daniel knew she meant Claire. He swallowed around a knot that dissolved only when he remembered the way his name had sounded on the phone the night before. A syllable not needed for permission, but invited for company. They carried the wing cup with them in a tote bag wrapped in the dish towel, not as a relic, but as a way of remembering to hold. The day was bright in a way that felt respectful, not showy. They stopped at the thrift store. The bell barked its comic bark and then, as if embarrassed by its own voice, fell quiet. The woman in the moon scarf hugged Lila with a care that acknowledged both bravery and fragility. She slid a small key on a ribbon into the girl's palm. "For any door that still hesitates," she said, "sometimes you have to teach locks how to listen." On the sidewalk, a street musician played something slow and tender on a violin with a cracked chin rest. His case held enough coins to prove the city still knew how to tip. Lila placed the laundromat quarter, saved, loved, then repurposed, into the case. The musician glanced up, nodded once as if saluting an equal, and let the melody follow them half a block. Afternoon found them in a different part of the city where a park leaned into a school and a school leaned back into a block of apartments that knew each other's arguments and reconciliations through thin walls. Daniel made a detour he had not planned to make. He led Lila down a side street to a building with a familiar stoop where he had once stood, measuring distance like a coward measures courage. He paused at the bottom step. A porch light, turned off in daylight, looked like a closed eye, still aware of what happens outside of sleep. "Is this where she lives?" Lila asked, the words respectful of invisible borders. He nodded. "Do you want to go up?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not today. I promised myself I would go when invited." He had learned that keeping promises isn't the same as performing courage. Sometimes it is the discipline of respecting someone else's timeline. Still, he slid a note into the crack of the door frame. "Nothing more than, 'Glad you asked me. I'll bring extra water. See you Saturday.'" He did not sign it. Names are helpful, presence is holier. On the way back, a summer storm flexed over the city again, quick and bright. A rehearsal for a bigger show it decided not to perform. Rain tapped, hurried, apologized, and ran off. They ducked under the awning of a closed hardware store where a row of paint chips fluttered behind the glass like tiny flags. Beside them, a man in a delivery uniform shifted from foot to foot, checking his watch, checking the sky, checking a text that did not arrive. He sneezed. Lila offered a tissue. The man took it and smiled, then noticed the bracelet on her wrist. "My little sister used to wear one like that," he said. "Said it made her braver than stairs without railings." He tipped his cap and went back into the weather when it eased. Another petal. Another witness in the mosaic. They went home to the smell of onion sautéing in olive oil, the sound of a neighbor vacuuming as if exorcising something heavier than dust, and a letter under the door, hand-delivered, the handwriting careful. To Lila. "If this is the right door, if not, I am sorry for reading someone else's name aloud in my head." It was from the tailor. Inside, a small patch in the shape of a wing, the kind you iron onto backpacks or the inner lining of coats. "Sometimes seams need something prettier than thread," the note said. "Sometimes they need a reason to believe they're allowed to hold." Daniel ironed the patch onto the inside of Lila's backpack while she watched, chin in hand, the seriousness of ceremony shining in her eyes. He did not announce that he was practicing fatherhood. He did not crown the moment with speeches. He simply pressed warm metal to fabric until glue understood loyalty. And then he lifted the iron and let the air cool the promise. That evening they returned to the hospice garden because days like this gravitate toward the places where the last sentences of other people's lives have learned to rest. They sat on the bench, the winged cup between them with a small handful of daisies nodding inside it like little elders who approve. Daniel took the recorder out again and replayed Tom's words, not to reopen wounds, but to let the stitches learn the pattern. After, the volunteer joined them for a minute. The kind of minute overworked people give when they have decided their job is more than tasks. "He spoke about you," she told Daniel softly. "He said the city was full of doorkeepers and that he hoped one might pass by at the right time." She looked at Lila. "He worried he had taught you how to leave. It seems he was wrong. You taught yourself how to stay, even while walking." On the path, an older woman dropped a scarf. Lila ran after her, returned it without ceremony, and rejoined them with the thoughtful elegance of someone who knows giving and receiving are actually the same gesture at different speeds. The field of view widened, the frame held. Near dusk, the sky stood still. Not a performance, not a painting, just the quiet of an ordinary weekday that had decided to be kind. Daniel felt the old ache step out from behind the tree where it had been lurking and try one last time to argue for despair. He let it speak, and then answered not with a counter-argument, but with a list of true things. A cup that had survived, a child who could sleep through thunder now, a daughter who had invited him to stand where she stood without making him pass exams first, a city that still knew how to nod at itself with respect in shop windows. They walked home the long way. At a bus stop, a teenager offered his seat to a pregnant woman and then, when she hesitated, smiled and stood anyway, holding the pole like a gentleman from a century that had not ended after all. Down the block, the man with headphones who had lost the receipt in the laundromat the night before now hummed the melody of the violinist, as if the song had decided to move house and found him to be a benevolent landlord. A stray dog with a cautious tail escorted them to the corner and then peeled away to investigate a different destiny. The world continued to stitch itself together in small, efficient movements. Back at the apartment, the phone on the counter held another message. Coach says, "Bring a hat. Son will be stubborn." He laughed and showed it to Lila, who nodded solemnly, as if proud of the weather for committing to a role. They ate dinner at the little table like people practicing a tradition, which is all tradition is, practice held long enough to become love. After, he filled the wing cup with water and set a daisy in it on the windowsill that faced the street. It glowed in the lamplight like a tiny lighthouse telling the harbor that boats could still come home. Night fell with the grace of someone kneeling, not collapsing. Daniel stood by the window, watching his reflection merge with the street. Across the way, the neighbor stepped out and lit a candle again. The flame shared itself with the glass of every window it could reach. He thought of the sentence on Tom's slip. A porch light is a kind of prayer. He understood it now not as metaphor but as instruction, as craft. He turned the lampshade ever so slightly until its warm circle struck the cup and the wall at the right angle. The room accepted the alignment as if a planet had found its orbit. Behind him, Lila unfolded the quilt with little stars sewn by hands he would never meet. She climbed under it and, after a while, asked with eyes closed, "Do you think he knows we heard him?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I think the rain told him." "And your daughter," she murmured, drifting. "Do you think she knows we made soup again?" "I think she will," he said, meaning more than soup. He tucked the quilt around her shoulder and placed the star tin near her cheek. He stood for a long time in the watermark of the lamplight, an ordinary man in an ordinary room, performing the most extraordinary act available to human beings, staying. Later, alone in the small silence that never felt empty anymore, he pulled out the paper slips one more time. He chose one he had not noticed before. Maybe it had been stuck behind the others. Or maybe some sentences wait until people are ready. You cannot pay back what love does. You can only pay it forward until the city becomes a receipt too long to hold. He placed it beside the cup and exhaled, slow, no longer holding his breath around his own regrets. On the street, a patrol car drifted by, polite as a librarian. Somewhere above, a couple argued softly, then laughed, then stopped. The elevator cables sighed, a mechanical yawn. The city rested in the knowledge that it had done at least one thing right today. Just before sleep, he sent one more message, this one to a number saved under old Coach, a man who had carried him through the only other season in his life when he learned to finish what he started. "How early do people arrive to watch?" he wrote. The reply came back in fewer than 10 heartbeats. Earlier than pride, later than fear. Come when the grass still smells like morning. He smiled, placed the phone screen down, and let that sentence settle into his bones. He lay on the floor beside the couch again, because some proximities rewrite history. The lamp cast its warm path across the rug. The daisy in the cup leaned an inch to the left, posing for nobody. He closed his eyes to the rhythm of a clock that seemed now to tick not toward deadlines but toward invitations. The revelation had arrived without trumpets. It had braided itself through errands and doorbells and a cheap bracelet and the decision to stand in the rain. Tom had seen him once and named his hunger. Lila had shown him how to translate that hunger into shelter. Claire had offered him a seat in the bleachers of her life. The city had kept time with a chain of small, stubborn kindnesses until the music could be heard even by a man who used to confuse noise with instruction. Forgiveness had not been pronounced yet. It did not need to be. It was already standing in the doorway, tipping its hat, waiting for him to say the simplest word, come. Tomorrow, perhaps. At a park, perhaps. Or at a kitchen table where a cup with wings held water for a flower that did not ask for pedigree before it opened. He breathed in. He breathed out. He did not hold his breath. In the corner, the lamp glowed on. Across the street, a porch light answered. Above, somewhere, what had been broken learned how to align without making a spectacle of it, and under the soft grammar of that ordinary night, two hands, one large, one small, rested inches apart on the same blanket, steady as a promise that knows which door it belongs to. Dawn came with its soft rehearsal of gold. The rain had vanished, leaving the air rinsed and light, the kind of morning that smells like a clean slate. The city blinked awake through layers of mist. Bakeries exhaled warm breath. Pigeons debated rooftops. Inside the apartment, Daniel stirred before the alarm, surprised to find peace already sitting in the chair by the window like an old friend who had let itself in quietly. Lila was still sleeping, one hand over the star tin, the other loosely curled near her cheek. The light touched her hair as though reluctant to disturb her dreams. Daniel brewed coffee, the familiar sound filling the silence like punctuation returning to a story that had once lost its grammar. He opened the window and let the cool air wander in. It carried the smell of bread, damp stone, and something new, the quiet scent of beginnings. He checked the clock. The game was in an hour, Claire's game. He felt the small quake of nerves that only the living feel, anticipation laced with gratitude. He turned to the sleeping girl. "Hey," he said softly, "time to meet a promise." She blinked awake, rubbed her eyes, then smiled with the uncomplicated faith of someone who believes the world can be kind 2 days in a row. "We'll be late," she said, already throwing on her jacket, the patch of wings glinting on her backpack. The park field was greener than he remembered. The air held that weekend hum, families unpacking chairs, parents juggling cameras and coffee, whistles cutting the chatter like birdsong. Claire stood near the bench, taller than when he had last seen her, hair tied back, laughter quick and unguarded. When she spotted him, her eyes widened but didn't close. Surprise gave way to something better, recognition without judgment. "Hey, coach!" someone shouted, breaking the tension. "She's got your legs!" He laughed, the sound shaking loose years of guilt. "She's got her own," he said, waving at Claire. She raised her hand in a tentative salute, the same way she used to when she was little and unsure how hugs worked in public. Lila tugged his sleeve. "That's her?" He nodded. "That's her." "Can I watch from the front?" "Of course." They sat near the field, the bleachers cool beneath them. The sun broke through a veil of cloud and the city seemed to sigh. The whistle blew. The game began. Claire sprinted down the field, hair catching light like a flag forgiving the wind. Each movement rewrote another line of the past. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not drama, just correction. The kind the heart makes when it finally stops trying to edit time and starts to live in it. Halfway through the match, she glanced toward the stands. Their eyes met. There it was, the smallest nod, the kind that says, "I remember what you taught me, and I remember what you forgot." It was enough. When the game ended, she jogged toward him. Sweat on her forehead, breath fast, voice steady. "You came. I told you I would," she smiled. "You used to promise that a lot." "And I used to mean it wrong," he said. "This time I meant it right." They stood there, unsure how to measure the distance between apology and acceptance. Then she noticed Lila, shyly standing a few steps back, holding the cup with the daisies. "Who's this?" Daniel looked at her. "A friend who found me in the rain." Lila offered the cup. "It's for you. It helps people find home." Claire took it, eyes softening. "Thank you." A breeze lifted around them, carrying the scent of cut grass and forgiveness. For a moment, everything slowed. The field, the crowd, even the sound of the whistle that marked another game beginning somewhere else. They walked together toward the parking lot. Lila skipped ahead, collecting fallen petals from a jacaranda tree. Claire leaned closer to her father. "You look different," she said. "Older?" "Lighter." He smiled. "That's new." She nodded. "Whatever it is, keep it." They stopped by the bench near the exit. Lila climbed up and began arranging the petals in the shape of wings. Claire watched her, then glanced at Daniel. "She reminds me of you," she said. "Funny," he replied. "She reminds me of who I wanted to be." Claire tilted her head. "You're getting there." He exhaled. The words landed like absolution. Later they walked downtown. The sun had climbed higher, drying the last traces of rain from the pavement. People moved with the quiet choreography of normal life. A delivery man whistling, a mother lifting her child to see the bakery window, a street artist sketching wings on the side of a mailbox. The same city, yet different, as if the sky had finally learned to listen. They stopped for lunch at the small diner where it all began. The waitress recognized them instantly. "Look at that," she said, smiling at Lila. "You grew sunshine." Lila grinned. "We found more people who keep doors open." The waitress laughed. "Good. The world needs those." They sat in the same booth. The vinyl still cracked, but the light was kinder now. On the counter, someone had left a note taped to the tip jar for anyone who ever stopped in the rain. Lila traced the words with her finger. Daniel ordered hot chocolate for her, coffee for himself, and soup for Claire. The waitress winked, still on the menu. They ate quietly, but the quiet wasn't heavy. It was full, like a heartbeat you can finally hear clearly. When they finished, Lila handed the waitress a folded paper. "For your wall," she said. On it, in her neat child's handwriting, was a sentence that seemed to belong to the whole world now. "Kindness is what keeps the rain from falling too long." The waitress pinned it above the register. "That's going to stay there," she said. They walked out into the sunlight. The air shimmered with the hum of traffic and laughter. Lila held Daniel's hand. Claire walked on his other side. The three of them formed a small constellation moving through the city, a pattern of people who had once been lost and now understood the geography of grace. They crossed the bridge where the first storm had found him weeks ago. The water below was calm now, reflecting the sky with a confidence it hadn't earned but somehow deserved. Lila leaned over the railing, her hair catching the breeze. "Do you think he's watching?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "I think he's finally resting. The kind of rest you earn when you know people found each other." They lingered there until the sunlight shifted. Then they kept walking. No destination, just motion that meant life. Around them, the city pulsed with a quiet faith in second chances. That night, at home, they set the winged cup back on the windowsill, this time filled with fresh daisies. Daniel turned on the porch light and stood in the doorway, watching the street breathe. Across the way, another lamp flickered on, then another and another, as if the city itself had decided to remember what Tom once said, "Forgiveness isn't a gate, it's the road," he whispered almost to himself. "We're still walking it." Lila looked up from the table, sketching wings in her notebook. "Then we're not lost anymore." "No," he said. "We're home." The night folded around them, quiet, certain, endless. The cup caught the glow, its shadow stretching across the wall like a promise that would outlive them all. And for the first time, the rain did not fall. The city remembered silence differently now. It no longer wore it like morning, but like dawn, something that simply waits until hearts open their shutters. Months had passed since that first night of rain, yet sometimes, when Daniel walked past the river, he still looked for the reflection of headlights in the water, half expecting to see that little figure again, standing alone, drenched and waiting. But the street where fear once lived had learned new habits, laughter in doorways, music leaking from cafe windows, children testing puddles not because they were lost, but because they trusted the way home felt underfoot. He and Lila had built a rhythm. Mornings began with a hum of coffee, toast shared, plans for errands folded between smiles. Afternoons were for small adventures, the bakery, the tailor, the park where stray dogs taught them the art of loyal silence. Evenings belonged to quiet, homework, dishes, the slow pulse of lamps. Some nights Claire joined them, her laughter curling through the apartment like music that already knew its lyrics. There were no declarations, no big speeches. Healing had decided to move in quietly, rearranging furniture while no one looked. One Thursday, the postman brought a small package with no return address. Inside was a worn photograph of Tom standing under the mural of the winged horse. Behind him, a blur, Daniel realized with a start, of himself, umbrella in hand, the day he had passed that street weeks before meeting Lila. The edges were curled, but the timing was impossible to deny. Someone, somewhere, had framed destiny with the casual precision of a divine joke. Beneath the photo was a note in familiar handwriting. Some moments happen out of order, so the soul can learn patience. He placed the photograph on the mantel beside the cup and smiled. "You clever old man," he whispered. Lila had grown taller. Her handwriting had softened into cursive loops. She still wore the silver bracelet, the wings dulled but intact, and sometimes, when the light caught it, the reflection danced across the wall like a reminder that miracles prefer modest stages. One evening, as autumn arrived on the wind's shoulders, they sat by the window watching the first leaves fall. The sky had that translucent melancholy only October understands. Claire joined them with mugs of cocoa. "We could go tomorrow," she said. "The hospice garden. Maybe plant something where the daisies were." They went. The garden was quieter now, the benches darker from rain and memory. The hospice staff had left a plaque near the bench. Tom Bennett. He taught the sky how to wait for forgiveness. Someone had placed a single cup beneath it, white, chipped, its handle missing, filled with tiny stones painted by children, hearts, wings, a single word, hope. Lila crouched beside it, brushing away fallen leaves. "He'd like this," she said. Claire nodded. "He'd like that you came back." Daniel placed a small pouch of wildflower seeds in the soil. Lila covered them with both hands, whispering something that made the air pause. Then the three of them stood, their shadows forming one shape in the late sun. On the way home, they took the long route through the market square. The violinist was there again, older coat, same song. He paused mid-phrase when he saw them and simply nodded. Music, it seemed, had its own way of saying, Amen. That night, Daniel found Lila asleep on the couch, a notebook open beside her. He turned it gently and read, "When I grow up, I want to stop for someone in the rain too." The words blurred slightly as his eyes filled. He sat beside her, the lamp painting a golden circle around them, and whispered a prayer not of religion but of gratitude. Let her never forget the road that light took to reach her. Time did what it always does. It moved, then softened, then moved again. Seasons change coats. The mural of the horse faded a little more each year, but someone always repainted the wings. Claire graduated, Lila turned 13. Daniel learned to live without waiting for permission. He still walked the city at dawn sometimes, the way a man checks if a heart still beats. He'd see the baker's window glowing, the nurse from the hospice buying flowers before her shift, the tailor sweeping his doorstep, the moonscarf woman feeding stray cats by the corner lamp. And he'd smile, because every one of them had once been a single kindness in a long chain, and now the chain had become the city's spine. One morning, years later, the rain returned, heavy, silver, unashamed. Daniel stood under the awning of the same diner, now repainted blue, watching puddles bloom on the street. He was older, hair lined with quiet. Inside, Lila, now nearly grown, was helping the new waitress stack cups. The winged one still sat on the counter, chipped and honored, holding daisies even in winter. He stepped outside and lifted his face to the rain. It didn't sting anymore. It sounded like applause from heaven's balcony. Someone tapped his shoulder. A young man, soaked, nervous. "Sir, sorry, bus stop's flooded. Do you know if there's somewhere warm nearby?" Daniel smiled. "Right there," he said, pointing to the diner. "Best soup in town." The young man hesitated. "I don't want to trouble them." "You won't," Daniel said. "They'll be glad you came in." He watched as the stranger hurried inside, the bell ringing above the door exactly as it had that first night years ago. The echo reached him across time. He laughed softly and whispered to no one and everyone, "Your turn, kid!" He started walking home. The street shimmered with water, each reflection a window into some other kindness waiting to happen. At an intersection, a car slowed, and through the glass, he saw a little girl in the back seat holding a small box wrapped in ribbon. The same blue as the one that had once tied a letter. She waved at him, not knowing why. He waved back, not needing to know. When he reached his building, the porch light was already on. Lila must have remembered. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and wet wool filled the air. A single note sat on the table. "Went to the bakery before the rain ends. Back soon. Don't forget the umbrella you never use." He laughed, picked up the umbrella, and opened it anyway. Not to shield, but to remember. The cup with wings stood on the sill, still catching the rain light. Beside it, a new letter waited. From Claire this time, her handwriting strong and sure. "Dad, thank you for coming that day. The field feels different when I look at the stands now. I think I finally understand why you stopped for that little girl. You weren't rescuing her. You were rescuing the part of you that still believed someone would stop. I love you." He read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it under the cup. The rain outside slowed, softened, stopped, as if the sky had decided its message was complete. He turned off the lights except one, the lamp near the window, and sat down with a mug of coffee. Outside, the street shimmered in after-rain gold. The reflections of lamps, cars, and stars blended into one slow-moving river of light. He whispered a prayer again, just 4 words this time. Let them keep going. And somewhere, maybe on another street, maybe in another story, a car would stop for someone crying in the rain, and a hand would reach out, trembling, unsure, but open. And that would be enough. Because kindness, once begun, refuses to end. The girl who cried in the rain had grown into a woman who built roofs of light. The man who stopped that night had turned his regret into shelter. And the world, stubbornly ordinary as it was, had become a cathedral made of small mercies, each one shaped like a hand that finally learned how to stay. The rain began again. Not punishment, not memory, just weather, soft and human. And under its steady rhythm, the city slept without fear. The porch light burned on,